And then when I got called into Myanmar, I was like thinking the same. I'm like, it's going to be hard, God. There's so much closed access. This is difficult. And, I was reminded again, like, who are you going to be? Are you going to be like Joshua and Caleb that said, let's press in, let's go forward, God's called us? Or are you going to be the one that's like, no? And then you never get to see the promised land.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, where we take you to the front lines and behind the scenes of our work around the world. I'm your host, Christy Graham, and this week I'm excited for you to hear from Karen Daniels. Karen is an operating room nurse, and she shared with me what it was like serving in the emergency field hospital and what God taught her in this response. You'll also get to hear from our patients and the doctors and nurses that help treat them. I love how the Lord directs and redirects our paths. Years ago, Karen was in Myanmar with our cleft lip and palate surgical team. Karen loved the people of Myanmar. She loved the culture. And she never thought she'd have the opportunity to go back. But I love that God had other plans. Here's our conversation where Karen shared how the Lord worked out the timing for her to go back to Myanmar.
I wasn't supposed to go back. I wasn't even supposed to be available. Because of my current role, I don't get to be on the disaster response team very often anymore. I was due to be on the ground in South Sudan doing a cleft lip and palate program. And because of insecurity there, they canceled that program right at the last minute. And I actually was just sort of wrestling like, God, why, this is so hard. We were ready. Our team was ready. And I had this sense of like, you need to be ready for something else in this time. Like, don't worry, I'm going to give you something else to do. And so our program was canceled, I think, on a Monday, and then the earthquake happened on the Friday. And next thing I knew, I was sitting on the DC-8 getting ready, to fly.
Mm-hmm. And so we shared in a recent episode, that it was a miracle that we were able to respond. We were able to get a team in so quickly and to be able to work. So since you were on that first wave, tell me what it was like to come in, set up the hospital, and you even started serving patients before the hospital was complete. What was this one like?
Yeah, this is really unique. So this was the first time we rolled out the mobile surgical team, and I got to be a part of that, which was really, really fun for me in the sense that I got to be with a lot of people I have a long history of serving with. So then I got a chance to go to this gymnasium and see beautifully lined up rows of patients, lots of volunteers, lots of supplies. It was really quite powerful to see. And so the initial need, most of the patients had been stabilized, which again was very different than most of the earthquake scenarios I've been in. So most of these patients had had the initial surgery for stabilization, and then were waiting then for further wound debridements or dressings or revisions of things. And so we said, hey, we can help, and this is what we'll do. I just think those patients were so brave, and I just thought how much trust they had in us, not knowing us, not being able to speak the language. And that was always humbling to see that, and we're Christian, which was also added to, the things that they could be fearful about. And yet they let us treat them, and, we explained and gave them as much information, but I'm sure it was took a lot of courage for them to be the first patient. So
you mentioned patients, and I think you were telling me ahead of time that, a lot of times when trauma hits, people shut down, become numb. They just do what needs to be done in the moment to survive. But I love that they felt safe and loved. And that's what we hear time and time again. They step into, whether it's the tents or there's love in there.
Yeah.
But as they were able to let down their guards and as the adrenaline wore off and the reality set in, tell me about just the heartache you saw and just I'm sure it's humbling to sit with people as they're absorbing their new normal.
Yeah.
Maybe can you tell me what that was like and maybe introduce us to a patient?
Burmese people are just so wonderful, and they're so easy to love in the truest sense. And so it was interesting for me to see this response. We were about a week in, so we were in this phase with our patients now where, the reality is my leg is gone, or I'll never be the same, or my foot is completely unrecognizable. We watched them process that. And that was something like I hadn't really maybe had time for before, or maybe been as emotionally connected to it. But this time that really struck me. We had a couple little boys that were probably like 9 and 10, and, they were terrified. They came into the operating room, and as soon as they rolled in that door, and I let the parent come in with them all the way to the operating room before we put them to sleep. But even with their parent there and a translator, there was just so much fear. And I just realized, wow, like a week ago, they didn't even know what an operating room was. Now this is maybe their third or fourth visit, and the trauma they have associated, like bad things happen. The first time I came in this, I had a leg, and now I don't have a leg. And I think the reality of that hitting them, watching them process that was just humbling to walk that with them and to try and explain. It was beautiful. We had a physical therapist on the team for the very first time. And knowing that there was hope for some of these kids when he would come around and be able to start working with them and just say, hey, your future is completely different now. You're 11 years old, and in 30 seconds, your life was forever changed. And yet now there's still hope for you. And that was really cool to be able to see that. He started helping them work and to start moving them. And instead of sitting in this like agony of like, what's my life? And I can't move and I can't. And then to be disabled in some of these countries is like devastating. And I think seeing him at work and giving them a chance to stand up for the first time and talking to them about prosthetics and what might be out there for them. That was really cool to be able to see that. So, we were able to give them hope in that sense. It's like, hey, this looks really bad in this moment. And you can't imagine life, a new normal, like with only like half a limb or no limb. But there's lots of people that have gone before and have lived this story and have meaningful lives. And that was really powerful to see. I had one really darling patient, her and her sister spoke both very good English. They were about 17 and 20 years old. The mom was taking care of the dad who had also been injured, and they were in another location. So there's these two young sisters that were in the ward, and we actually plated Jade's humerus. It was quite a complex break and fracture, and the ceiling of her house had fallen under and broken her arm really badly. And so she came into the OR and she was real brave. And the surgeon said, we're the very first Americans Jade has ever met. And so I start talking to her. She had great English. And I said, Jade, are you studying? Are you in university? And she said, no. In very good English, she said, I just did my final exams on March 25th, and I was supposed to find out March 28th my results. Well, that was the day the earthquake had happened. And she's like, but I'm quite sure I passed with flying colors. And I was just like, this is amazing. She was this darling little kid. And so she had a really tough time with pain initially, and the girls were able to get it under control. And they were so busy in the wards. And the next morning at devotions, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I see Jade rolled out to sit and listen to us sing and have devotions. And I thought, oh my gosh, like not only did she meet Americans, she got like introduced to Jesus along the way, and who knows what her story will be.
It's incredible. I know, that's why I love when you tell us these stories. But yeah, I can't even imagine, because my daughter just had ACL surgery and she's 17 in an in a hospital where they can speak to her, explain exactly what's happening. The surgeon can, we've met with him prior, and yet she was so scared.
Yeah.
Like, so I can't imagine these children that have no idea.
Yeah.
Didn't even know what surgery was, an OR.
Yeah.
And to be thrown into this, how scary.
Oh yeah. So scary. And you kind of try and do as many things you can. Like I said, we kept the parent with them as long as we could to put them to sleep, but they were just so fearful. We had one precious woman. She was an OCC representative in Yangon, and she came up to work with us. And initially she was quite nervous, I think, because she just didn't really know. And there are Christians in Myanmar for sure. But it's not something that the country openly embraces, Christianity. And so she really bonded with this little guy and his family. And so one day when we brought him in, and he was just falling apart, distraught. And he was like, I'm only coming if she can stay with me. I trust you. It's a typical 9-year-old kid. And he's had so much trauma. And it was really powerful how quickly she bonded with them. And she kind of was able to tell me most of the story, and he'd been caught in the rubble for quite some time. And it was quite traumatic for them and the family. And she had really made this powerful connection with them. And he really loved her. Like he just kind of would cling to her, more so than even his dad, which was really something. And so it was really neat to see Burmese Christians taking care of each other. And one of the things the patients would ask us for was they asked us to pray. I remember one mom saying to the translator, "You tell them to pray." And somehow, and that was very early on, they must have heard or seen, or a translator told them that we were praying for people before we took them to surgery. In the OR, typically the surgeons will pray. And so that very quickly became well known. Like we prayed for people and people loved that. Like the Buddhists really liked that, that we prayed. And so we had a lot of monks that we took care of, and we brought one to the operating room one day, and so the anesthesia provider was praying and he was like, "Lord, I mean, I've never prayed for a monk before, Lord, but you know the story." And, it's just this moment of kind of like hilarious, like, could I have made up in my life that I'd be in Myanmar in an operating room under tragic circumstances, but at the same time praying for a Buddhist monk, like, in his home country. Like none of us could kind of make that up. That's really the Lord, and it was powerful. And it was just sort of fun to hear him vocalize that. Like, I don't know how to pray for a Buddhist monk, God, but you know, and you love him. And yeah, that was really neat to know that they understood the power of prayer.
I love that our staff are getting to be the hands and feet of Jesus as they treated all people in the emergency field hospital. Now I want you to hear from a monk who survived the earthquake. It's truly a miracle that he's alive. He was giving a sermon when everything began to shake around him, and our teams got to pray over him and share the love of Christ.
How long has he been a monk?
12 years. 12 years. He is the head monk of one monastery. On the 28th of March, the earthquake suddenly happened and the whole monastery was shaking. So he told the crowd to, okay, please stay down and don't run away with panic. Suddenly, something from the ceiling fell and it passes his head, but right through his leg. So after the earthquake, his crowds carried him to the car and get to the government hospital. However, at that time, government hospital was full of emergency patients. So they treated him temporarily and asked him to go back to the village and rest for a few days. Then they called him back and told him to come to this hospital.
Does he know that this is a Christian hospital? And if he does know that, how does that make him feel?
So he knows, and he is very glad that he is treated here. All the people treat him very well, and he would like to be recovered very soon.
It's incredible how God enables our teams to come into these places and serve people like this Buddhist monk, a person that they likely would never have met otherwise. Karen shared a woman named Sue's story, another patient in the emergency field hospital.
She told us to call her Sue because none of us got her name right either. She was one of the first patients that was brought over to us. And, she had lots of tats and she had like her, her permanent eyeliner on, and she's young and now she's lost her leg. And you just felt for that. But she was so like gracious and so like thankful, like, thank you for coming. And so we did her initial surgery, and then we gave her a block to help with her pain management and things like that. And lower limb extremities blocks don't always work as effectively. And so you knew it was gonna be rough. And so a lot of times when they have their initial amputation, they have to have multiple revisions because the muscle is so crushed in the initial injury that you don't necessarily know how much damage is going to be. And so some of them have to keep going back and back for more revisions and things like that. And so Sue was like that. And so we did her initial surgery, and then I didn't see much of her until one day I came in to take another patient to the OR, and it was in the bed beside her, and she was lying there, and just tears were just streaming down her face, and she was just clearly in pain. Here we're in this like smoking hot hospital. She's lying on a vinyl bed, with not the luxury of air conditioning or anything like that. And I just had so much compassion for what she had gone through. And we were able to get her nurse to come over, and she was this sweet Irish nurse, Nikki. And she again was so busy with so many patients, but she managed to get her pain medication right away. And um, we had talked about trying to do another block on her and that kind of thing. And then I'd come back later to see her when I brought the other patient back, and she was a lot more comfortable. But I didn't know her story until I sort of read about it and the loss that she'd had. She lost her husband, and I was able to see the humanity of it. And knowing her story, you're just like, oh wow, what has she gone through and walked through? And yet I didn't know that. You'd walk past, she had so many friends that were with her, and she was like smiling and laughing, and you just thought, I have no idea what her story entailed. I didn't know she lost her husband, and she was with us a long time. But she became really special to our team and our staff, and very lovable, and kind of a presence in that female ward for a long time, because she was a really courageous person whose life is forever changed. But hopefully it was also changed by the fact that she knew the love of Jesus in that time frame she was in our hospital.
Can she take me through the day the earthquake hit?
There's a 3-story building. The whole building collapsed. She was stuck in the building debris, but fortunately only one leg. She was in the building since around 1 p.m. So by the time they rescued, it was already 9 p.m. Her husband passed away in the earthquake.
Wow.
He loved me so much. He cared me.
I can tell based on her tears that he was a good husband, that he loved her. If she's able, how would she describe her husband?
Her husband is the one who cares only for her. He always teases her, and he always make her fun and laugh. And he even says he will take care of her the whole life. And now he left her, so she is very heartbroken.
I understand. I can tell that you loved him and that he loved you. I hope she feels a little bit of encouragement and love from these Samaritan's Purse doctors, because we come here from very far away for her, to love her and to give her care. And I want her to know that. After, the earthquake happened, what was she thinking while in the rubble?
Don't afraid.
She is not afraid, even in the rubber. She is calm.
Where does that calmness come from? I mean, you're stuck under rubble. Your leg is badly injured. How was she able to be calm?
Yeah.
Also a Christian. She's a believer.
Amen.
She said, whatever God wishes, let it be.
Is there a verse or a story from the Bible that has encouraged her during these hard times?
Oh, she has a verse written here.
Psalm 23. Can she just say it in her language?
ထာဝရဘုရားသည်ငါ၏တိုးထိန်ဖြစ်တော်မူ၏ငါသည်ဆင်းရဲမခံရစိတ်နှံသောကျဆာရရနာများကိုအိတ်စိတ်လုံးခံစား၍ထာဝရဘုရား၏အိမ်တော်မှာအစဉ်မြဲနေရပါလိမ့်မည်အာမင်
Amen. That was so beautiful. Thank you.
After talking with Sue, our podcast correspondent said, "Now I know why she had peace, even though she was in the rubble. It was because Sue had the Lord." I loved hearing Sue read Psalm 23 in her native language. The Bible truly is alive and active, and the gospel transcends cultures. While I was talking to Karen, I wanted to know what God taught her on this response to Myanmar.
the older I get, the longer I've served, as much as I've like had so many experiences, sometimes I'm like, I'm a little bit more crusty and a little bit more cynical now than I probably used to be. And something that the Lord really had started to deal with me on in February, even with a trip that we took out to South Sudan into an area that was very marginalized near the borders, super hard. And I was reading the story of the 12 spies that were sent out into the promised land. And it hit me when I was reading it because I thought I would have been like those 10 guys that were like, we can't do it. It's too hard. It's too dangerous. Like that's sometimes kind of now where I'm like, I've done everything. I'm tired. This is going to be really hard, you know? And I got convicted because I thought, man, the courage of those two, Joshua and Caleb, had that stood up and said, yeah, it's going to be hard, but we can do it. God's promised the land to us. And I had just been wrestling and been so convicted because I would have been like, if that was me, I would have been one of those 10 people that are like, no, not happening. This is too difficult. And so I kind of had really been challenged personally to start looking at that, to say in my own workplace and where I'm called to, what does that look like? And then when I got called into Myanmar, I was like thinking the same. I'm like, it's going to be hard, God. There's so much closed access. This is difficult. And, I was reminded again, like, who are you going to be? Are you going to be like Joshua and Caleb that said, let's press in, let's go forward. God's called us. Or are you going to be the one that's like, no? And then you never get to see the promised land and you miss out on what God has for you because of you get caught in your own worries and anxieties and fears that God will not carry you through. And I think that was something that, again, it started kind of in earlier in this year, but even for me and Mara was like, so kind of, well, are the visas going to come? Are we going to be able to do this? And I think that's something that God will continue to work on for me. But I got to see that when you step out in faith, God shows up and you can make a difference.
I know that story is such a good reminder of the foundation of Samaritan's Purse, the God room principle that Bob Pierce wanted to build, that you step out and do things that, you can't do by yourself and in your own strength and to see the good and the blessings. Because I think we do. And the older I get, the more I see the negative versus the positives, like they could bear, they recognize Joshua and Caleb, the fruit and the blessings and the goodness. Everyone else just saw the opposition and the things that were standing in their way. And when you know that greater is he that is with us than those that are against us, it's like that needs to be our anthem. Every response is so different because of who's welcoming you. So what have you learned about that? Even just loving and embracing where you are, being respectful, and then trusting the Lord with the details and the timing.
Yeah. Some of the best advice I ever got was from one of my mentors, Dr. Ed Carnes. I think he's been on the podcast before. He's just a legend of an ER doc and humanitarian. And he taught me, he said, don't ever forget that you're a guest in this country. And then the other thing that he taught me was, don't ever forget this is God's project and not your project, which is very easy for us to do because we're there on the ground and I can do it in my own strength. And I've done all these other things. And it's easy to get into the mode that it's like, it's about the Samaritan's Purse show or my show or what I need to do. And I always come back to that to say, hey, God's timing is perfect. And yes, there are times when you're like, we're not ready to go and it doesn't seem right, but you have to trust that the Lord knows. And for one thing, being Christians, you do need to respect the laws of the land. We are guests in this country. What are we going to do to our testimony if we just say, you don't matter, we're above you, we think we can overstay our visas and things like that? That is a smear on the name of Christ, I feel like. And we do need to respect the laws of the land. And then also to say, God, yes, you brought us here and you gave us favor, but it's not dependent on me or our team. You can, it says he who began a good work will, complete it. And so he can be trusted to say, God, the seeds that were planted here, he can turn into a beautiful harvest, even if we're not here. And so I think it's learning to trust that, to say, okay, God, this is your deal and we have to go, but you are God and we are not. And what you can do through this is above all we could ask or imagine. And then resting in that.
I love Karen's attitude of surrender and turning everything over to the Lord. It's my hope that you and we would be like Joshua and Caleb. Psalm 37:5 says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." I want to have that kind of trust. I want to have faith that truly commits my way to the Lord. And further down in that psalm, it says, "The steps of a man are established by the Lord. When he delights in his way, though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand." And it's truly the Lord who upholds us. He establishes our steps, and even when we lack the faith to see his plan at work, he is holding us, he is guiding us. And so this week, I hope that listening to this helps you commit your way to the Lord, to trust him fully and wholeheartedly. And remember, he will never let you be cast headlong. And even though our work in Myanmar has wrapped up, please continue praying for the people that we were able to treat and share the gospel with. Pray that the patients, that they would continue to experience the love of Christ, and I pray that these seeds would take root. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless you.